All right, it's Tuesday, January 14th, 2025, and new information about what really happened to the Santa Enz Reservoir after Tucker Carlson drops his latest episode last night with guest Michael Schellenberger, the excellent independent journalist who's from SoCal, did his own investigation into why the Santa Enz Reservoir was offline. The reservoir that sits directly above Palisades. It's been over a week, and we have yet to get an official straight answer. Newsom said his team keeps giving him different answers, different information. Reporters can't seem to find out. Newsom ordered a special investigation to get to the bottom of it last week. And it turns out it wasn't that hard to find out what really happened here. The reason likely nobody told us, or is telling us, is because the reason makes them look like incompetent fools. And this is what any good old-fashioned journalist does, right? There are very few of them left these days, but they get out there, they make calls, they knock on doors, and that's exactly what Michael Schellenberger did. Wait till you hear the reason. This will make your blood boil. Also, the latest on the confirmation hearings in Trump's SEDEF. Will he make it through the process? Chuck Schumer has reportedly said that he has let the dogs out on him, telling his caucus to go to town on Hegseth. We're going to break it down, but before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel, and consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. Here was Gavin Newsom 2 days ago, outed on national television as a liar, being caught, called out in real time. This clip, it's a great example of how slick politicians like Newsom lie to us and get away with it usually.
I'd
Watch
like to
this.
extend that to the president-elect. I don't know what he's referring to when he talks about the Delta smelt in reservoirs. The reservoirs are completely full, the state reservoirs here in Southern California. That mis and disinformation, I don't think advantages or aids any of us. Responding to Donald Trump's insults, we would spend another month. I'm very familiar with them. Every elected official that he disagrees with, very familiar with them.
We do know, though, from reporting here locally that one reservoir that serves the Palisades was not full.
And that's exactly what triggered my desire to get the investigation, to understand what was happening with that local reservoir. That was not a state system reservoir, which the president-elect was referring to as it relates to the Delta and somehow connecting the Delta smelt to this fire, which is...
Yeah. He was outed. NBC outed him as a liar. Saying it wasn't a state system is total crap. The Santa Enz Reservoir, the reservoir that served Pacific Palisades, the place that burned down, was empty, like Trump said it was. And he tried to say Trump lied. Well, everyone now knows that, yes, that reservoir was empty. It is empty. The LFD was operating with only three water tanks. Each tank held 1 million gallons of water, while the reservoir holds 127 million gallons of water. But it was empty. So why was it empty? Nobody seems to have a straight answer about this. For days, nobody knew exactly how long it was empty or why. Then we learned it was offline since February 2024 due to repairs. NBC reported that the repairs had to do with a crack, they said. But they too said it wasn't completely clear why something like that would take 11 months to fix. Well, last night, Tucker Carlson dropped his latest episode, an unscheduled episode, with guest Michael Schellenberger, a great independent journalist. If you don't know who he is, he's one of the few that actually do the legwork, make phone calls, knock on doors, and hallelujah, we finally appear to have an answer. The real story about why the Palisades Reservoir is empty and has been offline for 11 months, and it's worse than you could imagine. This is a clear example of why and how progressive policies lead to dangerous, preventable outcomes. It turns out there wasn't a crack in the concrete structure. There was a tear in the cover for the reservoir. That's it.
Right.
Roll
So,
the tape.
so that was and then you hear people go, oh, well, there's nothing you can do because like once the homes are burned down, like the water lines, you can see the pictures, the water like will be spilling out, of the homes. And so that lowered the water pressure. That was a total lie. There is something called the Santa Enz water reservoir, which is the potable water, meaning the drinking water that also goes into the fire hydrant system, because the fire hydrant, the fire hydrant system is the drinking water system. It's the same thing. It's the exact same system. That reservoir was empty, and it was the second largest of the 10 potable water reservoirs that serve LA County. Let me make one distinction here because there's actually two kinds of reservoirs. There's the reservoir with the snowmelt water these really big lakes, basically. And then there's that's the unpurified water, and then they purify it, and then they feed into these reservoirs where they store the water for all sorts of reasons, for emergencies. So that is an absolute crime, that Santa Enz Reservoir. Why? Because first of all, it's right next to the Pacific Palisades. So for people that don't know, Pacific Palisades, of course, is like right near. It's on your way to Malibu. It's like the last big neighborhood before you get to the.
And they're Palisades. They're over the water.
That's right. And so they have a reservoir. Like, you look at the Google Maps and you look at where the Santa Enz Reservoir is, it's right next to, like, a few thousand feet from Pacific Palisades, and it's really high up. And so if you had water coming from that, the firefighters would have had plenty of water. They would have had the water pressure, even if you had lost some homes and had the water out. So, I mean, two major failures. The first was the failure to aggressively respond days in advance, even though they had very clear warnings. The second was the reservoir was empty. One reporter has reported that the firefighters had not been warned by the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power that reservoir was empty. If that's true, that's just additionally scandalous. But one of the things that we think probably happened is that they had been required to have a cover for the Santa Enz Reservoir, which is the potable water, the cover to prevent the water from being contaminated. In the old days, like the 50s and 60s, birds would poop in those reservoirs, and they would just put a bunch of chlorine in them.
Right.
And then we decided, well, that the water had a lot of, it still was not particularly clean, so we wanted to be cleaner. So you can just put a cover over it, which is a kind of plastic or rubber lining. It appears that there was a tear in that. They had to repair it. They should not have removed that water ever during a fire season. If you need to make that repair, you do need to drain right before you do the repair. But you would make that drain. And the people that I interviewed said, look, it would take days, if not a couple of weeks, to repair it. It was empty for at least a year. So it was sitting there for a year. And the person I interviewed, who works as a senior executive at a different water utility in California, said if we had any of our reservoirs empty, we would be like super nervous the entire time. And you would also then have backup water systems.
So, get this. Mayor Karen Bass allows her reservoir to stay offline for nearly a year because the vinyl cover, or whatever material it's made of, has a small tear in it. Why would fixing a reservoir cover cause the reservoir to be empty? It's a good question, right? Well, that's the mind-numbing idiocy of progressive policy. They think there's a small tear in the cover, so now we have to drain the entire reservoir, drain all 117 million gallons of water, because, I don't know, a caterpillar may have crawled in there. Meanwhile, Karen Bass let it sit empty for almost a year. This is negligence, in my opinion. She needs to resign immediately. And we reported yesterday how Gavin Newsom is in full damage control mode. He's thinking about how to save himself, folks, how to save his political career. The only possible way to do that is to throw Karen Bass to the wolves. And I believe that's exactly what's happening. Liberal media has now turned on her. The owner of the LA Times, an uber left-wing paper, came out yesterday and proclaimed it was a mistake to endorse Karen Bass, calling her incompetent.
First
Watch
of all,
this.
we'll accept some blame, right? So at the LA Times, we endorse Karen Bass. I think right now in front, that's a mistake, and we admit that. So I thought it was very important early on for me to come out. And I think we were one of the few to say competence matters.
And another story, 13 of Trump's nominees face confirmation hearings this week. Today, Pete Hegseth, Trump's Secretary of Defense nominee, is scheduled to face a public grilling in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee this morning, starting at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We have some video of it. Dozens of Navy SEALs lined up this morning on Capitol Hill to support Hegseth's nomination. And this is a critical test for how Republicans will treat Trump's cabinet picks during these hearings. How these establishment rhinos will behave will tell us a lot. How much of the hearing will focus on the personal stuff? Will Republicans pile on with Democrats going after the drinking allegations, the sex allegations, etc.? Democrats have been instructed by Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, to not hold back when it comes to these hearings for all of Trump's nominees, reportedly telling his caucus to go to town. And they're doing exactly that. Before Pete even opened his mouth this morning, the ranking member on the committee, Senator Jack Reed, proclaimed, "You are not qualified."
The Secretary is expected to be a fair, nonpartisan, and responsible leader, as well as a trustworthy advocate for the men and women that he leads. Mr. Hegseth, I do not believe that you are qualified to meet the overwhelming demands of this job.
Senator Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts released a list of 100 questions that she says she needs answered. Now, if Hegseth answers them, do you think she's going to support him? I don't think so. She also said, "Your confirmation as Secretary of Defense would be detrimental to our national security and disrespect a diverse array of service members who are willing to sacrifice for our country." Really? Diversity? That's where she's going with this? That's what she's worried about? She also says Hegseth is unfit to serve, that he represents an insider threat due to a tattoo she claims is tied to right-wing extremism. The tattoo she's referring to is the Jerusalem Cross, for heaven's sake, the same symbol that was featured on the cover of Jimmy Carter's funeral program. These people are grasping at straws, and as I'm recording this, Pete's currently answering questions. But what we can report on is his opening statement. It was perfect. Even some of the Democrat senators were shaking their heads in agreement. At least that's what it looked like to me. It's a bit lengthy, but it's worth listening to.
The
Roll the
Department
tape.
of Defense under Donald Trump will achieve peace through strength. And in pursuing these America First national security goals, will remain patriotically apolitical and stridently constitutional. Unlike the current administration, politics should play no part in military matters. We are not Republicans. We are not Democrats. We are American warriors. Our standards will be high and they will be equal, not equitable. That's a very different word. We need to make sure every warrior is fully qualified on their assigned weapons system, every pilot's fully qualified and current on the aircraft they are flying, and every general or flag officer is selected for leadership or promotion purely based on performance, readiness, and merit. Leaders at all levels will be held accountable, and warfighting and lethality and the readiness of the troops and their families will be our only focus. This has been my focus ever since I first put on the uniform as a young Army ROTC cadet at Princeton University in 2001. I joined the military because I love my country and felt an obligation to defend it. I served with incredible Americans in Guantanamo Bay, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and on the streets of Washington, D.C., many of which are with me here today. This includes enlisted soldiers I helped become American citizens, and Muslim allies I helped immigrate from Iraq and Afghanistan. Because when I took off the uniform, my mission never stopped. Now, it is true and has been acknowledged that I don't have a similar biography to defense secretaries of the last 30 years. But as President Trump also told me, we've repeatedly placed people atop the Pentagon with supposedly the right credentials, whether they are retired generals, academics, or defense contractor executives. And where has it gotten us? He believes, and I humbly agree, that it's time to give someone with dust on his boots the helm. A change agent, someone with no vested interest in certain companies or specific programs or approved narratives. My only special interest is the warfighter. Deterring wars, and if called upon, winning wars by ensuring our warriors never enter a fair fight. We let them win, and we bring them home. Like many of my generation, I've been there. I've led troops in combat. I've been on patrol for days. I've pulled the trigger down range, heard bullets whiz by, flex-cuffed insurgents, called in close air support, led medevacs, dodged IEDs, pulled out dead bodies, and knelt before a battlefield cross. This is not academic for me. This is my life. I led then, and I will lead now. Ask anyone who's ever worked for me or with me. I know what I don't know. My success as a leader, and I very much look forward to discussing my organization's successes at Vets for Freedom and Concerned Veterans for America. I'm incredibly proud of the work that we've done. But my success as a leader has always been setting a clear vision, hiring people smarter and more capable than me, empowering them to succeed, holding everyone accountable, and driving toward clear metrics. Build the plan, work the plan, and then work harder than everyone else around you. I've sworn an oath to the Constitution before, and if confirmed, I will proudly do it again. This time, for the most important deployment of my life. I pledge to be a faithful partner to this committee, taking input and respecting oversight. We share the same goals: a ready, lethal military, the health and well-being of our troops, and a strong and secure America. Thank you for the time, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.